To Andreas Krieg. He's the assistant professor at the Defence Studies Department in King's College London. He's joining us from London itself. Thanks for speaking to us on the NewsGrid. So, as you're just hearing, Denmark has suspended future approval of weapons and military equipment exports to Saudi Arabia. This follows Germany doing the same thing. Just put this into context for us and tell us what it actually means for Saudi Arabia.
Right. I mean, the Europeans, like the Americans, have this choice between interest and values when it comes to arms sales to Saudi Arabia. I think we have to be quite careful to... So there are two things here. There's on one hand, there is the political message that these countries say, and states, so Germany, Scandinavian countries, and Spain saying we no longer will export to Saudi Arabia. That's a political message with relatively little impact on the ground, because Saudi Arabia's operations in Yemen in particular, which we are so concerned about in Europe and in the United States, are basically not hindered by these kind of sanctions on arms sales. So the Saudis will continue their operations because they're most important partners in that war, but both in terms of the defense industries they tap into, as well as the operational and strategic the support that they receive. These three very important partners for Saudi Arabia are the United States, the UK and France. And it's really up to these three countries to send a message to Saudi Arabia and say we're actually not content with the way this war in Yemen has been waged. And we're also trying, if we go the next step, we want to do punitive actions or take punitive actions against Mohammed bin Salman for whatever happened in the consulate in Istanbul.
You were mentioning Spain so just a moment ago. We know that some Spanish deputies rejected a proposal, in fact, to stop arms sales to Saudi Arabia. So this really shows that Europe is not anywhere close to a common European position, as one German minister had called for.
Absolutely not. I mean, and it has a lot to do with interest. So the Europeans are a lot less blunt in saying that it is about interest. I mean, the Trump administration was very blunt, saying it is about $100 billion potentially being spent over the course of 10 years. The Europeans are less blunt about this. But also in Europe, the interests that are involved in Spain, in Denmark, or in Germany are relatively insignificant in the wider context of what money is being spent. The UK is the #2 exporter to Saudi Arabia, and their exports to Saudi Arabia last year were roughly in the region of £2 billion pounds worth of arms sales being approved, and that is relatively so for the UK. That's quite a lot. But then you say, if you look at the Scandinavian countries, Germany, their exports are very, very small in comparison to that. So nothing is even close to the $100 billion that they're talking about for the United States.
So is Europe really acting any differently than the Trump administration then?
Yes and no. I think the Germans are probably they're taking the highest moral high ground, if you will, in this whole debate. But also because at the moment they have no significant arms deals outstanding. And I think if the situation was a different one and the Germans had a massive arms deal in the region of a couple of billion euros to discuss, that probably Germany would have taken a different approach, as they have done in the past, because these are important decisions for local industry and for jobs. So they are not very much different to Trump in saying, especially the UK isn't, in saying that actually there are a lot of jobs attached to these sales, and we can't afford to basically lose that kind of business at the moment.
I mean, Britain's foreign secretary recently highlighted himself the difficulty in agreeing on a common EU stance when it comes to Saudi arms exports. Do you see the UK taking a firmer position?
No, not at the moment. First of all, the UK is in a different situation. They are completely preoccupied with Brexit, so they might even take a stance and say we are different from the European Union, because by the time these sanctions come into place, we might no longer be a member of the European Union. And secondly, Great Britain has to kind of find external markets outside of the European market, and these markets are obviously in the East and they are in the Gulf. So it's not only Saudi Arabia, but it's also the UAE, Qatar. These are important markets for British defence industries, and I don't think they can afford at this point to do without the couple of billions of pounds worth of arms deals that are being made in this part of the world, just because they're losing quite a lot of market share in the European Union by leaving by leaving the European Union. So I think as a market post-Brexit, I think the Gulf is very significant for Britain, and I don't think Britain at this point in time is thinking about any serious sanctions.
All right, Andreas Krieg, we thank you for speaking to us on Al Jazeera.